Some nights, the thing keeping you awake isn't anxiety. It's introspection's evil twin. It's not panicking, but you're not making to-do lists either. But you're lying there, wide awake, and replaying conversations and thinking about different decisions, wondering what would have happened if you would have said no, or asked for more money, or walked away when you had the chance. You imagine a different path, one where you were in more control, where you had more information, where you had more courage. You imagine where your time, your energy, your art belonged to you. But that's not how this works, you know? Not when you're working creative, not when you're professional, not when your craft is your paycheck. And we all sign this contract, maybe not on paper, but in practice. You can have my talent, just give me enough to live. And slowly, without realizing it, we gave away more than we meant to. We gave away the part that we loved, the part that made it ours. Physical exhaustion has remedies. We can sleep, rest, time off. But this deeper creative fatigue, that takes something completely different. Because it's not your body that's just tired. It's your creative spirit. You know, I didn't start out wanting to be a photographer. I had no plans to be a photographer. And when I joined Taylor Guitars back in 2018, I was a graphic designer. I was an art director. And photography was just something that I did on the side. It was really for fun and for friends and the occasional gig that paid for burritos and gas money. But then it shifted when I took this job. Suddenly the camera was a part of the job, and the job came with a biweekly paycheck. And that changed everything. It changed the dynamic between me and the craft. Because now I wasn't just making photos because I wanted to. I was making them because someone else needed them. Because it was Tuesday. Because there was a product SKU and a deadline. And at first I was stoked. I was growing. I was falling deeper in love with the craft. I was studying more. I lived it. I breathed it. I obsessed over the smallest things. But the more I cared about it, the more alone I felt because no one else was seeing what I was seeing. They didn't see the light the way that I saw it. They didn't care how the frame was composed or breathed. But the irony was that I was working for a company that celebrated musicians as artists, but didn't seem to recognize what I was doing was art too. It was just content, a thumbnail, a sales flyer, a thing to post. And I think that's where this ache really began. When you give something of yourself to the work and it doesn't come back, not in appreciation, not in recognition, and not even money. I need to share something with you. This past week, I almost quit photography completely for good. Not because I should take a break kind of quit. More like I want to sell my gear and walk away forever kind of quit. It was a bad couple days where I realized that something needed to change drastically. Leads weren't coming in like they used to. Money I thought I had locked down suddenly evaporated. And when I looked at my trajectory, where I was heading if nothing changed, it was not great. And I sat down and I did the math and I looked at what was coming in versus what I needed to go out. And I stared at numbers on that Google Sheets document until they burned into my retinas. And I convinced myself that the reasonable thing to do, the adult thing to do, would be to stop fighting this uphill battle, to admit defeat, to find something stable, to return the world of W-2s and benefit packages and bi-weekly paychecks. I went as far as to look at job listings on LinkedIn, marketing directors, creative directors, content managers, photography going back to a side hustle, regulated to weekends, vacations, and the occasional side gigs. And you know what's strange? Part of me felt relief at the thought of walking away, of not having to find the next client or craft the next pitch deck or worry about the next invoice being paid. I allowed myself to wallow in this self-pity and fantasize over LinkedIn job posts for about 24 hours. But I couldn't really sleep, not because of anxiety, but because I was in problem-solving mode. Solutions, possibilities, new directions. My brain would not shut the hell up. So I got up and I literally returned to the whiteboard to restructure and remap and rethink my whole business plan and model. It was like some defiant part of me refused to accept this logical conclusion. Some stubborn, more irrational voice kept whispering, but what if we tried this? I wish I could tell you I had some like dramatic epiphany, some movie moment where the clouds parted and I discovered my true purpose, but it wasn't like that. It was quieter and more gradual. Just a slow realization that I can't quit, even when I desperately want to. I'm literally at a point where I have given everything to this idea that I can make this work, that I can create things worth seeing, worth feeling, worth paying me for. I wish I could be happy in finance or doing sales. I wish I could find contentment in a normal 9-to-5 job with a normal bi-weekly paycheck. And it's not even about happiness for me anymore. It's about something deeper, more profound, something that reaches past contentment or career fulfillment and into an area that I can't even describe, but only feel. I don't know if being a photographer, honestly, is a blessing, a calling, or a curse, but it is who I am, and there is no other way but forward. And maybe you felt this too, this strange mixture of dread and devotion, this contradictory desire to escape, and the inability to walk away. And that's what we're talking about today. My name is Patrick Four. This is a Terrible Photographer podcast, and today's episode is called Pillow Talk. I heard this story once about the composer Igor Stravinsky. A young man asked him for some advice, some career advice. He said he was torn between becoming a composer or doing something, quote, more practical. And Stravinsky said this to him. He said, "Do you have to compose?" This young man said something like, "Well, I love it. I think I have some talent." But Stravinsky shook his head. That's not what I asked. I asked if you have to compose. Because if you could imagine yourself being happy doing anything else, anything, then do that instead. Only become a composer if it's the only thing that lets you live. That story has always hit me because art doesn't let you walk away easily. It's not something you pick. It's almost like something that picks you. And once it's yours, you feel this desire, this pull to make things. Not because it's profitable, not because someone told you to, but because something in you needs to. And that's the paradox. And that's the truth that most creative professionals eventually face. We didn't just choose this path The path chose us, which makes this commercialization of our calling all the more complicated. The world will gladly pay you to be creative, but not always to be an artist. And that's where this slow exhaustion starts. When you're pouring your soul into the work and the work keeps asking for more. Part 2, the economics of soul. Let's talk about money for a moment, because that's the part that no one wants to discuss. How the financial reality of the creative work quietly warps our emotional relationship to it. When I hit my low point this week, staring at those spreadsheets, it hit me. The real damage wasn't just financial. It was what the pressure was doing to my creativity. Here's the loop that I found myself stuck in. When the client work was abundant, I feel secure. Invoices go out and the bills get paid, but I have no energy left for personal work. There's no time, no spark. And when the client work dries up, suddenly I do have time for the personal work. But now I'm panicking and I'm anxious and I'm broke and I often can't afford to do the test shoots that I want to do. And it's almost impossible, even if I had the money, to create from a place of panic, because that fear, that anxiety is always in the back of my mind. And it's like a perfect trap, a beautiful, brutal, shitty paradox. And most of us are living in it without even realizing it. We tell ourselves, well, once I'm financially stable, then I'll make the work that matters to me. But in creative careers like ours, stability often comes at the exact cost of that personal vision. You take the jobs that pay, even if they pull you further away from who you are, until one day you realize the gap between what you believe and what you make has grown so wide, you can barely see across it anymore. Look, I don't have a perfect answer for this. I don't think there is one. But I've started reframing the whole thing. One of my favorite authors is Rick Rubin. He talks about creativity. And he says that creativity is not a resource to be mined, but a muscle to be trained. It doesn't run out, but it can be overworked, pulled, torn. If we don't allow for rest, reflection, play, we don't get stronger, we just get injured. We treat creativity like it's infinite, like it'll just keep coming no matter how often we exploit it or abuse it or injure it. But maybe the truth is more complex. Maybe creative energy operates on a different kind of economy, one that doesn't align with capitalism. So here's my question. Here's what I'm thinking about lately. What if we made a budget, not just for money, but for our creative soul? We think about things like this. I can give this much to client work before it starts to drain my reserves. Or this job might pay well, but it will cost me the part of me that loves actually doing the work. Or this personal project might not make anything. In fact, it might cost me money, but it will pay me in joy and agency and identity and learning and growth. And that's a return too. Look, no one's going to pay you to rest your creative muscles. No one's going to protect your spark. That job falls squarely on you. And maybe the most radical act in a creative career is stop pretending your energy is limitless and start treating it like a sacred, finite resource that it is. Not to be hoarded, though, or spent carelessly, but to be invested with intention, with attention, and with care. But recognizing the cost isn't enough. Even when we know we're overextended, when we see the signs of burnout, when we feel the aches of misalignment, it's still hard to stop because we're creatures of habit, of hustle, of work culture. We tell ourselves we'll rest after the next job or after the next deadline or after we hit that one last financial goal. But the truth is, most of us don't need another productivity hack. Most of us, we need to interrupt the pattern, a way to stop the slow drip of deprivation, of depletion before it becomes a flood. And that starts with noticing the spiral when it begins. So, how do we stop this loop? How do we quiet the noise at night, the spiraling that makes us feel like we're failing? We interrupt the pattern. We start by acknowledging it, by noticing it. The moment your mind starts to replay the conversation or writing a future where you haven't lived yet, I want you to pause, interrupt it, name it out loud. Look, I'm spiraling, I'm catastrophizing, and then I want you to do something physical. I want you to get up, drink some water, write it down, and say something kind to yourself, even if it feels phony. For me, this looked like setting up a physical timer, a real physical timer, where I could just let myself spiral 5 minutes to feel it, to think about it, to dread, to catastrophize. And then I had to do something else. Sometimes I'd go outside and play with my dog, Loki. Sometimes I would make pour over coffee. Pour over coffee is great for this. It forces you to slow down and to actually enjoy the slow process of making coffee. And sometimes I just would take a nap or I would meditate. I would stop and breathe. And these small interruptions would break the loop. Because here's something that it took me most of my life to figure out. You can't logic or think your way through a feeling. You've got to move through it. So I also think a huge factor when it comes to creative burnout and creative mental health is having to do with autonomy, specifically creative autonomy. And when it comes to creative autonomy, I think this is important. The question is, how do we keep it? Well, you protect it like a flame. You don't blow it out every time someone else needs a spark. You protect it with your hands when the winds pick up. You feed it even when no one else sees its value. You have to say no more often. You renegotiate the rules, the contract, the dynamic between you and the client. You have to find ways, even within the brief, even within the commercial job, even within the wedding, to inject something of you. And if that's not possible, which that's the case sometimes, then maybe the real work is making something of your own, even if no one sees it, even if it doesn't make a dime, even if it doesn't make it into your portfolio. Because the more you create outside of their system, the more power you regain inside of it. Curiosity cannot live in fear. Passion doesn't bloom under resentment, but both return the moment you give yourself a little space, a little grace, when you cut yourself some slack. So, where do we go from here? Forward. Not because it's clear, not because it's easy, but because this thing that won't let you quit, it's still here. So keep going. Make the next thing. Say the truer thing. Take your power back. And tonight, when your head hits the pillow, remind yourself you're not behind. You're not broken. You're just tired. and that's okay. I've been thinking a lot about what we sacrifice for our creativity. The stability, the ease, the comfort of knowing exactly where our next paycheck is coming from. But I also have been thinking about what we get in return. Last night I was up late restructuring and updating my portfolio, and I was going through some past personal work, trying to find something to fill in some gaps. And I came across one image that I had forgotten about. Nothing special to anyone else, but when I saw it, I felt this spark again. A quiet recognition, a moment of connection with my own work. I know, as weird as it sounds, but I felt that same spark I did when I took the image. It was the moment of excitement that the vision that I had inside of my head translated into a frame in my camera. Something that came from me and no one else. An image that myself, the model, and the universe all came together to create. It sounds small, it sounds dumb, but in that moment, I remembered what it was all for. And it's not for Instagram followers or client lists or how much gear you own or how much money you make. It's that electric moment when you capture something honest, something true, when you translate a wordless feeling inside of you into a language that other people can see and on some level understand. The moment when you see, and by seeing, you help others to see. And that's the paradox at the heart of creative work. The more we need it to survive financially, the harder it becomes to maintain the innocence and wonder that drew us to it in the first place. But I also think that's why artists keep going, even when the path gets hard, even impossible, because we've tasted that connection, that truth, that moment of light. And once you know that it exists, it's hard to settle for anything else or less. And that's not to romanticize the struggle. Financial precarity isn't noble. Being broke sucks. Burning out is not a badge of honor. Trust me, I know. But I do think there's something to remember why we started in the first place. What called us here? And some days I still daydream about quitting, about finding an easier path. But I'm starting to accept that for some of us, there's no other fucking option. This isn't just what we do, it's who we are. And the question isn't, should I keep going? But rather, how do I keep going in a way that honors both my art and my well-being? Maybe that's what we're all trying to figure out. That delicate balance between feeding our creativity and feeding ourselves, between answering the call and paying the mortgage. I do not have this solved, but I'm still here. I'm still trying to figure it out. And if you're listening to this, maybe so are you. And that counts for something. Maybe that counts for everything. So this week, your challenge isn't to go shoot something new. It isn't to build a portfolio or land a client or make something go viral. It's to be content, to interrupt the spiral, to break the loop, to let the past go, even if it's just a little. To stop carrying failure like it's a full-time job. To say no to what drains you, to say yes what calls you, to be kind to yourself, especially when you don't feel like you've earned it or deserve it. And for some of you, that might sound simple, but in a world that is constantly pushing us to produce more and hustle harder and to rise and grind, allowing yourself to be content is actually pretty radical. And honestly, it's probably harder than any technical challenge that I've ever given you. It demands more courage than trying a new lighting setup or approaching a stranger for a portrait. This might be the hardest brief of your life, but it might be the most important one too. Again, you're not behind, you're just tired. So be good to yourself. That's the whole assignment. I'll leave you with something that I discovered a while back and I come back to often. It's a passage that reminds me what it means to make work that matters, even when the world doesn't always understand it. It's by poet and author Mary Oliver from her book Upstream. It's 6 a.m. and I'm working. I am absent-minded, reckless, heedless of social obligations, etc. It is as it must be. The tire goes flat, the tooth falls out. There will be 100 meals without mustard. The poem gets written. I have wrestled with the angel and I'm stained with light and I have no shame. Neither do I have guilt. My responsibility is not to the ordinary or to the timely. It does not include the mustard or the teeth. It does not extend to the lost button or the beans in the pot. My loyalty is to the inner vision, whenever and however it may arrive. If I have a meeting with you at 3 o'clock, rejoice if I am late. Rejoice even more if I do not arrive at all. There is no other way. Work of artistic worth can be done, and the occasional success to the striver is worth everything. The most regretful people on earth are those that felt the call to creative work, who felt their own creative power restive in uprising and gave it neither power nor time. So, as Mary Oliver puts it, some of us are stained with light that may be forgetful, maybe late to meetings, maybe not always on time with the mustard, but we always show up, eventually, for what matters. It's the vision that calls us, not out of duty, but necessity. And this is why we keep going. And even when we're tired, not because we're chasing likes or clients or money or validation, but because we've been chosen by something larger than ourselves. Something that demands we answer even when the world is not listening. As always, stay kind, stay curious, and stay terrible. Let's talk again next Tuesday.